Morning, Squire, and welcome to Pop Screen, part of the Geek Show podcast network. We are that corner of the Geek Show that likes to deal with the good, the bad, and the inexplicable of movies either starring about or by pop stars. No, the podcast covers such a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, from documentaries to science fiction, from country and western to hip-hop. I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a writer for The Geek Show, of course, as well as Horrified, Byline Times, and We Are Cult. And I've been joined this week by...
Mark Conliffe. I also write for The Geek Show. I write for We Are Cult as well. You can find me on Letterboxd, and I have written for Arrow Film, various essays, and also a chapter in Scarred for Life, Volume 2.
Indeed, and it's that Scarred for Life zone that we're kind of in now. We're going a bit hauntological, aren't we?
I suppose so, yeah, I guess so.
I find every BBC TV play from this era to have a bit of that atmosphere to it. I suppose because they're not exactly they're not exactly forgotten things, but they are very hard to find these days.
Yeah. If you didn't know they existed, then it's not on your radar kind of thing. Yeah. True.
And it's a testament to how off the radar they are that the first film we're going to do from Second City Firsts, a run of half-hour plays produced by the BBC during, was it just the 1970s? Just the 70s?
Yeah, it was. It was between 73 and 78.
Right.
There was an anthology series, sort of like the kid brother to Play for Today, I guess.
Yeah.
So they were little half-hour snippets from Pebble Mill Studios in Birmingham, hence the title Second City. And first, because they were first-time writers.
Oh, I didn't know that bit. That's interesting.
Yeah, they were mainly. Although writers kept returning to the well, they were given the break on Second City first mainly. I think specifically first-time writers, but also you get first-time directors as well.
Right. Because the first one we're going to do is Glitter by Tony Bicat. And this was recently repeated along with two other Second City First plays on BBC 4. And even in this BBC approved remastered rescreening, the opening sequence has like little VHS lines across the bottom, little bits of VHS interference.
It does, doesn't it? I have this on bootleg, and I thought, it's going to be on BBC 4. It'll be a nice polished up copy of it, but no, it is literally the only copy in existence, I guess, with the little VHS marks underneath it. Yeah.
Which is quite shocking. I mean, Mark and I are both big Doctor Who fans, so we are more than most people aware of how appalling the BBC's archive policies during these times were. But it is still quite a jolt to see something on TV nowadays with VHS interference lines.
Yeah. It really is, and especially in the world of like digital television now, everything's so crisp and high definition and what have you, that you see something that needs auto tuning, get the tracking on that. It's quite a shock to the system, really. But I mean, you touched upon that idea of how just how awful the BBC treated their own productions at the time.
Yeah.
This I made a little note before we started. There were 53 films in the Second City Firsts series between 73 and 78. 21 of them are missing, believed, wiped. It's quite astonishing, really, isn't it?
And this is something that you're never going to understand if you're not into archive television. I mean, if anyone's thinking of going back and watching, say, Breaking Bad after Better Call Saul ended, you're never going to be in a situation where anyone says, oh, 15 and 20% of that show doesn't exist anymore. But, we've put together some like off-air recordings with photos over them.
Yeah.
It's just unimaginable that this would ever happen now.
It's bizarre, isn't it? And, it's funny you should mention that because as we're recording it this week, they've announced Series 2 of Doctor Who is getting the Blu-ray box set treatment.
Yes.
And some fans are already complaining that episodes that are missing haven't been animated specifically for the box set. It's like, just these fans clearly didn't grow up in the 90s when all we had was telesnaps.
Yes.
And a Target novelisation.
It's quite a weird thing because obviously on the Geek Show Patreon, I've been going through this long process of reviewing all of the classic series of Doctor Who. And occasionally you just have to think, all right, I enjoyed that to a certain level, but how much would I enjoy the Myth Makers if I could see it move and someone's mum wasn't doing the hoovering in the background? It's... But these do exist in however straightened a circumstance they are. And the first one we're going to talk about is Tony B. Cat's Glitter, which is in a lot of ways the ultimate pop screen movie. I mean, you could not get more pop screeny than this.
That's true, yeah. I mean, it sort of kick-starts the career of Toyah Wilcox.
Yes.
There is a sort of journeyman musician in it called Dixie Dean. I don't know what his real name is, but he gets to do his bit as well. And then you have an appearance by none other than Noel Tidybeard Edmonds himself.
You're one of my absolute fantasy careers is explaining the career of Noel Edmonds to foreigners. I just think you would get the best reactions out of that. It would be like a reverse reaction video where the person who knows all this stuff is the one who's explaining it, and the people who don't are the audience who are just sat there, really? Someone died on this, and he just went straight back into the studio as if nothing had happened.
It's mental, isn't it? Absolutely mental, that when you consider it now. That was the Late Breakfast Show, is it called?
It was, yes. Yeah.
And you just think that it's like, yes, somebody's died, but he's back on television next week, It's so strange. Whereas nowadays people get cancelled for like the slightest thing.
Yeah, these days, Mark, if you killed a member of the public in a stunt gone wrong, the woke brigade would be right on your back for that.
But no, could you imagine that though? I mean, people go like, "Oh no, he said something here," or an old tweet from like 2012 has appeared, in which he goes, "I tell you what, blah blah blah, something racist or something," and they're like, "Oh no, his career is over." Man kills somebody in a stunt, back on television next week, and allowed to. Well, yeah, we've got to be careful what we say here, haven't we?
Probably, yeah. Really.
A show hosted by Noel Edmonds that had daredevil stunts featuring members of the public, and one of the members of the public,
idea, like even before anything goes wrong.
Yeah, it's an odd one. I mean, he almost killed John Peel as well, didn't he? Before that.
Oh God, yeah, that incredible footage where every time it comes, it cuts back to Edmonds. It's just like he's seeing a particularly ribald prank, and then it cuts back to Peel, who sounds terrified because he's just had a fucking car nearly hit him in the face.
Near-death experience, yeah. But then he's
become an even stranger figure now, though. I mean, that is odd enough, but he's really bizarre now.
See, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this, because I knew that we'd hit gold with you and your obsession with Noel Edmonds.
But I heard I heard an appearance he made on Jeremy Vine's Radio 2 show
Oh,
where
God.
he was trying to communicate with people's pets on air, which, I mean, already there's about 20 things wrong with that sentence. And what I think gets to the essence of Edmonds, it's not that he's remarketed himself as this sort of great spiritual healer. But he's also remained just as chippy and petty as he always was on it. Like, he is trying to talk to someone's cat or someone's parrot or something and going, "It's okay. I know you're on the BBC and they're not very nice, but it's okay." It's like even becoming an ascended cosmic master who can manipulate reality with his mind, as he is now. That's not the bit of Edmonds' career I have a problem with. I'm sure that all of that is true, by the way. Even that has not stopped him being very bitter at the BBC for cancelling Noel's house party.
I mean, he claims to have got rid of cancer by using positive thinking, but is he kind of thinking that he might have got cancer by just holding this grudge against the BBC for the past 20 odd years?
I mean, there's an incredible John Ronson article. I don't know if you've read it, but from very early on in his comeback with Deal or No Deal.
No, I don't think so.
Oh man, it's very good. I think he wrote this for the Guardian, so it's still available in their like online archives now.
Right.
Well worth digging out. But Ronson's angle on it is you can see how far like mystical and paranoid thinking has dug its fingers into the mainstream of British life by going backstage on Deal or No Deal and finding out that everyone from the contestants to the host is convinced that this tea time quiz show has some occult significance.
Yeah, definitely. I just, that was just a weird series, that wasn't it? Yeah.
It's one of those things, isn't it, where if you're in a position where you can pull the trigger on something like that, it's probably going to work because it is basically the sort of silly guessing game you would play with your friends as kids, pumped up to be like a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire style quiz blockbuster.
That is exactly it. It's a silly guessing game you'd play as kids in a school playground. You know, I've got something in this box, or have I? You know,
Yeah.
but he would treat it like this sort of like a game of high stakes poker, in the sense that he'd go, "Oh, I can see you. I can see your game plan here. What game plan? You're just picking a box at random.
The
Why is
game
there a
plan is
game plan?"
when you're asked to open a box, you pick a box and you open it. Now, an inexperienced player wouldn't know that, but
Oh, I can see what you're doing here. Yeah, the banker's going to respect you for this. What, for saying number 12 instead of number 5? Well, I just didn't get it. I don't get it.
up.
I'm sorry, I don't get it.
Yeah, because when we first see Edmonds in this, he's a disembodied voice coming from a halo of light, which I thought is probably how Noel Edmonds sees himself.
Sees himself. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we should probably give this a bit of background, really, because at the moment it just sounds like what the fuck's Noel Edmonds doing?
It sounds like it's the play built around Noel Edmonds, which
you know, what the fuck's Noel Edmonds doing is it's just a standard question you've got to ask yourself on a daily basis, really, isn't it? But it's the story of a girl, Toyah Wilcox, and a boy, Phil Daniels, who break into BBC Television Centre, specifically the Top of the Pops stage, to perform on Top of the Pops in the middle of the night, I'm guessing. It's an abandoned stage, isn't it? It's an abandoned studio.
Many questions are had in the choice of setting for this, I think. Yes.
Yeah, also the fact that it doesn't look like the Top of the Pops studio anyway. To me, it didn't.
I was kind of cooler with that. I thought, oh well, maybe it did look like that when there's no one in it. The big break in verisimilitude, and the thing that you would think two young Top of the Pops fans would be aware of, is that they seem intent on playing live there, which you would think
Yeah,
on Top of the Pops in the 70s.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, but yeah, I hadn't thought of that actually. But yeah, the studio thing threw me. But I mean,
Yeah.
how typical of the BBC though. I suppose because it's Pebble Mill, it would. That's just
Oh
dawned on me then.
yeah.
It's because Pebble Mill. It wouldn't have been Television Centre anyway, would it? It would have been. They'd have bussed them all to. All the actors would have been. Would have been
Yes.
on location in Birmingham. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. But it's typical of the BBC, isn't it? You write a piece about they arrive at the top of the pop studio, and somebody goes, "Well, we'll build a studio for that." And I said, "No, the top of the
Yeah.
pop studio, it's already there, guys." But just there's no budget thought gone into it, is there?
None whatsoever. Although it's telling that, like you say, you don't think of it as being a Pebble Mill thing until you really sit down and concentrate on it, because the whole piece is written with that kind of romance of Television Centre in
Yeah.
mind, with that attitude that Television Centre is the magic place where every door you open has another of your favourite shows behind it.
Yeah, and it's got that kind of dreamlike, childlike perspective in this, isn't it? When
Yeah.
I first heard about it and read about it, I thought, oh, right, so it's Toyah Wilcox and Phil Daniels. That's very punk,
Mm.
isn't it? Automatically, that's
Yeah.
very punk. Um, Breaking into the top of the pop studio, wanting to play. I mean, that sounds like a really punk half hour.
Yeah.
And this is nothing. Punk sort of like feels like it's on the horizon, but not really.
Punk is most palpable in it, I think, whenever Toyah Wilcox gets a close up. She has
Yeah,
that same kind of vengeful alertness in her eyes that John Higgs was writing about, was saying that, John Lydon always had when he was with the Sex Pistols. And I think I I may be wrong. I do not know anything about Tony Bicat, but I do not think that the writer of this was tuning into any kind of nascent punk scene. I think all of that feeling comes from her performance.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think it's telling that like the Dixie Dean character. I can't think
Mm.
what his real what the character's name is. I just know the real name of Dixie Dean. He sort of turns up. He's like this drunken troubadour, isn't he?
Yeah.
Proper. I mean, he's less Bob Dylan and more Dylan the hippie rabbits from the Magic Roundabout. To quote a
Yes,
joke from,
definitely.
I think that's a joke from Porridge originally, so I'm going to crib that. But if it was a really, if it had its finger on the pulse of the burgeoning punk music scene, they would rip that guy to shreds, and they
Yeah.
don't. And it's almost like oh, it's a star rather than who's this
Yes.
who's this old has been that's turned up, you know?
There's actually more of that kind of conversation with Edmonds, who
Yeah,
has
yeah.
to suffer Wilcox saying to him, "You must have been young once."
It's a bold move for an incredibly vain man, really, isn't
It
it?
is, yeah. I
But then
wonder,
I suppose he's just thinking, hey, I get to be in something other than children's television, or
well, maybe, yeah. I also wonder if, he hadn't gone through the kind of career setbacks that gave him this Alan Partridge level of chippiness that he has now.
yeah, he was still a favourite, really, wasn't he, at the time? Because
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I think Saturday Swap Shop had started. I think.
I think you're right. Yeah. There hadn't
Um,
been anything he'd done that had failed at this point, and that's always a sort of a moment where the true self is revealed, isn't it? Anyone can be a beloved superstar if everything they're in works. It's how you cope with your first absolute
yeah,
bomb that, yeah.
yeah. That's true. And I think on a slight parallel to that idea, and I think we've got to be grateful that it was Noel Edmonds they chose for this. It could so easily be somebody like Jimmy Savile, and we'd never be talking about this ever again.
As problematic as Noel Edmonds is, he was one of those top of the pops producers who was not a paedophile, who were in pretty short supply back then, I think.
Very, very short supply. They're not sex pests or paedophiles that we know of, so that's that's fine. Yeah. Because it's true, it could have so easily been this thing that we don't talk about.
Yeah. Apologies, listeners, if after this comes out it's revealed that Noel Edmonds has groped someone's aura or something like that. But,
can we just do a sort of backup just in case? I'll go.
Yeah.
I always knew there was something weird about him. Yeah, just put that in, and then you can just you can go with that if anything does happen in between recording.
Yes, that would be one of the stages. Normally, I find it very annoying when some celebrity falls from grace and everyone's like rushing to be the first to say, "I was never a fan, never a fan." Yeah. But with Edmonds, I think I would probably struggle to resist the temptation.
It's really weird, isn't it? Because he did try to make a comeback not so long ago with "I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here," didn't he? And
oh yes, yeah.
The rather foolish general public. Well, I suppose because they were the average age of people who watch I'm a Celebrity are probably not really Edmonds' generation, so they voted him off like straight away. It's like, you fools! There's gold there. There's gold on that screen. Who knows what would have happened if like somebody hadn't cleared the dunny out that day? He could have just gone ape. I wanted it to be like Colonel Kurtz in Apocalypse Now. It could have so easily been. It could have so easily been Edward, sort of, or like scenes from the beach. Just painting himself, just going, the horror, the horror.
I mean, that was the year when Nick Knowles was going around talking about his opinions on whether the moon landing happened.
Yes,
or not.
Yeah.
Maybe
so I mean, we did.
The niche was filled. Edmonds had his space co-opted.
That is very true. Yeah, but I remember people. I think it's that. What's that girl's name? It was an In-Betweeners.
Emily Atack.
That's the one. Yeah. She was on Richard Herring's podcast, and she said, "Oh, he's lovely, Noel Edmonds." And Richard Herring was not convinced. No, he's lovely. It's like, yeah, but he wasn't there that long enough to not be lovely, was he? So I imagine if anything did happen to Noel Edmonds, there'd be a lot of people going, "Oh, he's a lovely man. He's a lovely man," and a lot of other people going,
yeah. Yes. Well, the ultimate test of this, obviously, is that episode of Brass Eye where Chris Morris invented the story about Noel Edmonds going mad and killing Clive Anderson, and he was taking the story around showbiz parties and interviewing people, and they were all going, "Edmonds, really?" No one was going, "Get the fuck out! Come on, that's a made-up story." Everyone seemed to have this attitude of, I mean, it's shocking, but the signs were there.
They were always there, yeah. My favourite one is John Chalice, Boise. He's like, Noel Edmonds. But yeah, you're right.
Fraser just sort of puts it into part of his existing spiel, and he's going, people like me, we're rascals, but it's your Hungerford guys, your Noel Edmonds they're the ones.
Those you've got to watch out for. It's always the quiet ones. It's always the quiet ones.
It's always the quiet ones with their own Saturday night BBC show, as the quiet ones tend to have.
It's always the ones with the giant pink and yellow spotted best friend.
I mean, probably true. If it turned out that Michael Ryan did actually believe that Mr. Blobby was following him around, it would fit. I could believe it. We must eventually stop being rude about Noel Edmonds and talk about Toyah
Oh,
Wilcox. I get the feeling the subject will come round again.
probably will. It probably will. Do you know this is an interesting one as well because, like I say, it's sort of she was plucked from obscurity. Toyah Wilcox. She was an extra in something, and somebody spotted her and thought, and then this was like a sort of showcase, not only as a singer but also an actor. And I believe after it was broadcast, she was sort of like courted by the National Theatre and record companies at the same time. I mean, that is huge. That is a proper, in a way that I don't think stars are made these days, isn't it? You know,
It is a proper, like, the sort of thing that happens in Judy Garland movies, yes.
yeah, yeah. It is so weird, and you think Toyah Wilcox, you know, because she's been around for that long. You sort of forget what an impact she had when she just sort of burst on the screen. Really, she looks very. She's got that sort of like 20s look, 20s sort of like that. The way that
Silent
Roxy Music,
kind of.
yeah, the way that Roxy Music sort of album cover started to update those sort of like silent movie it girls for the 70s. She's got that kind of look. So it's not the 100% punk Toyah Wilcox. It's not the Toyah Wilcox we meet in Jubilee, which we've talked about on this thingy, on this podcast. But yeah, she does stand out. Whereas in contrast, you got Phil Daniels with long hair, which you don't tend to expect, and a sort of bum fluff tash. You don't really expect that from Phil Daniels, do you? But
No, I was genuinely surprised that it was Phil Daniels, and I think
yeah,
like just a few years later, after Quadrophenia, you would not have cast Phil Daniels in this role because he's not bad in it, but I don't think it gets to any of the qualities that make him interesting as an actor, really.
no, it's a very second fiddle role. Considering it's
Yeah.
quite a small cast, it's a very second fiddle role for him, isn't it? It's like her wannabe boyfriend,
Yeah.
who sort of helps her sort of break in, and the suggestion that his dad was in prison or something. That's how he knows how to break into BBC television sets.
Yes.
Fair enough, you know.
Yeah, it used to be. Yeah. It's like the knowledge for black cab drivers, isn't it? If you want to be a
Yeah.
burglar, you've got to know how to break into BBC television centre.
There's got to be a specific number of buildings in London that you can break into. One of them just happens to be TV Centre. When Michael Fagan broke into Buckingham Palace, what people don't realise is he was just doing the knowledge of burglary, really.
What people don't realise is he actually thought he was getting into the studio for going live. He wanted to steal Gordon the Gopher.
Just happened to come in the Queen's ear. That's all.
Man, the first draft of that Smith song was a very different affair, wasn't it?
Definitely.
But part of the story, and this goes back to the idea, as you were saying, of Wilcox as being this, like, at least double threat. Part of the story is told in the musical numbers. There are several musical numbers, and there's a clear progression through them from Toyah and Phil sort of haplessly rehearsing this song that they want to play to the one that Dixie the Session Museum plays through to, and I'm surprised this didn't derail Toyah Wilcox's punk career before it began, through to a closing number with her singing with a band who the end credits inform us were actually called Bilbo Baggins.
Yeah, again, it's punk, but it's not punk, is it? We're really on the cusp. We're really on the cusp here, aren't we? And it's this weird marriage of both what would soon become opposing forces that are sort of like working side by side to each other. Bilbo Baggins, I can just see the loom pants now, can't you? You know?
Yeah.
Smell the patchouli oil and see the loom pants. Yeah.
They're one of those bands where as soon as you hear their name, you can probably imagine what their logo looked like.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like a quick aside. Remember the Really Wild show in the 80s with
Yeah, yeah.
Terry Nutkins and Chris Packham? I used to say that Terry Nutkins and Chris Packham both looked like roadies, except Terry Nutkins was a roadie for Gentle Giant, whereas Chris Packham was a roadie for The Clash.
Yes, that's very good. Yeah, that's very true.
I could just see Nutkins hauling some gear and equipment for Gentle Giant, definitely.
Well, Chris Packham still feels like one of the best case scenarios for what an old punk should turn out like, I think.
Yeah, definitely, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
He feels more punk than Toyah Wilcox does here, which is like, not in an unpleasant way, by the way. Like, I imagine that maybe if this had been like, I don't know how popular this was at the time, but maybe if this had been more widely seen, you'd have had a few more people giving her a hard time over it when she launched a punk career. But ultimately, you watch it now and you think, well, it's an acting role. She's acting. Even when she's singing, she's acting. And I think she manages to find a voice for Sue's, a singing voice for Sue that isn't like Toyah Wilcox's own singing voice, but makes sense for
yeah,
that character.
I think a couple of years later she did an episode of Shoestring, which afforded her something similar, in that she was a punk singer. So she gets to act the role of the punk singer in that episode, and she also gets to
Mm.
perform various numbers, including one that wraps the show up. And Shoestring was always that weird. I don't know if I'm going off on one, but Shoestring was always that weird sort of cross between sort of like a hippie and a punk. You know, the whole
Mm.
character had that kind of weird vibe going on. He was sort of in between one or the other in a way that Toyah Wilcox singing, supported by Bilbo Baggins, just doesn't do it.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think that the song that she sings with Daniels, even though they are sort of fumbling through it, and that's part of the point, uh, but she's really good singing. She has a
Mm.
really clear, folky, almost sort of Sandy Denny style voice, which I
Yeah,
did
yeah,
not expect coming from her, but is really good.
yeah. That's true. Yeah, yeah. Did you get a handle on the story? Because I struggle with the story.
It's one of those ones, isn't it, where it, there is a certain kind of British television play where you were half expecting the ending to be, and they all ended up realizing it was purgatory. And this is very much one of those, isn't it? It's not a
Yeah.
naturalistic drama in a lot of ways.
I mean, when you open today saying it's like hauntology, you know, there is that
Mm,
spooky undercurrent to this, and it's
yeah.
right there from like Edmonds just appearing in like a cloud of sort of light, you know, behind the spotlights and that, and this disembodied voice, and then he goes behind the set and picks up a postcard, but it's huge,
Yes,
and then it's dead
that is
small in his
very
hands
odd.
again. And I wonder, is it supposed to be some kind of Alice in Wonderland riff?
Oh, maybe,
That's
yeah.
that's the only thing I could sort of take from it, that it was some sort of Alice in Wonderland, and that Phil Daniels is like the White Rabbit or something, and because he just disappears, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's nice. That's a nice reading of it, and I wish the play itself had worked that through a bit more,
Yeah,
because I didn't find those magic realist touches as successful as they are in other TV plays of this era. It's certainly not integrated as well as it is in the work of someone like Dennis Potter or David Rudkin, for example.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I'm not a big fan of the writer here, Tony Becat.
Mm,
I've seen he did another Second City First called Trotsky is Dead,
mm,
which isn't particularly great. And I've seen a
yeah.
couple of things from him. He did a play for today called A Cotswold Death, which is sort of like
That's a kind of
wants,
Sherlock Holmes riff, isn't it?
yeah, it wants to be this idea of like an update of the golden age of murder, but in the 80s. So you kill a guy off
Exactly.
who owns a mansion house, but hey, guess what? He's an Arab sheikh, and it's just,
Yeah.
it's that kind of, it, oh, I mean, it doesn't mean to be racist, I'm sure, but watch now, you think, oh, it's that attitude of like, oh, the Arabs are taking over, that kind of
Yeah,
nasty little
yeah, yeah.
undercurrent attitude that sort of happened. But it gave Ian Richardson a chance to do Sherlock Holmes before he actually did play Sherlock Holmes. So that's
Mm,
something. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of him as a writer, really. Um,
yeah. I
he did
could, I haven't seen any of his other things, but I can see it in here. Yeah.
he did do a really interesting uh, directing job on a film called Skin Flicker that's written by Howard Brenton.
Ah,
That's the
yeah.
only thing I would. That's the only thing that I've been impressed by of his. Really, the other stuff I've seen up to now, I'm not really impressed with. Like I say, I think there is a magical realism thing at play here. The idea
Mm,
that she just sort of seems to just flip between the Top of the Pop studio back to her mum's kitchen. There's all that, but
yeah.
it's like knitting fog. You can't really grasp hold of where the through line is in the drama, really.
Yeah, and I think there's two problems with it. I think firstly that those jumps in reality aren't integrated as well as they are in something. I mean, as you know, I recently watched White Lady, the only thing that David
Yeah,
Rifkin had
Ripkin,
directed,
80s.
and that covers, yeah, screenplay, wasn't it?
Yes, I think it was. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that covers even more conceptual ground than this, but it does it in a way that feels really disciplined and unified, I
And
think.
still really fresh as well.
Yeah,
Whereas this is just,
yeah,
I think the best way to describe this, if you read the premise, like I say, if you read the premise of it, you'd think, oh, this is like a really uh, balls to the wall, punky, you know, let's get rid of everything in the
mm,
past. It's like, I'm breaking into Top of the Pops. I mean, there's even that song, "Everybody's on Top of the Pops," isn't it? It's that kind of. You would imagine
on
that
top
kind
of
of.
Basillos.
Yeah, yeah. You'd
Yeah,
imagine it's going to be that kind of vibe, and what you get instead is a weird kind of episode of drama rama for
a
children's
bit.
ITV.
Yeah, yeah. I think
It's
one of the sort of foundational problems with it, apart from like what I think of BCAT's writing, is that I don't think BCAT has enough insight into pop fandom of this age to really dig under the surface of it. It reminded me a bit, even though this is a very different film. But have you ever seen what's it called? Is it Song to Song, the Terrence Malick film?
don't think I have. No, doesn't ring a
It's the
bell.
one he part shot at Austin City Limits, and it's got a lot of musician cameos in it. We'll probably do it on pop screen at some point, if only because it's always a good idea to rewatch a Terrence Malick film. But
Mhm.
on the first watch, I remember thinking I just kept going through it and thinking there are parallels that you could have uncovered in this, but rock music and dance music just isn't his terrain. And as a result, it's not like it's expressly wrong, just like I don't think glitter is expressly wrong, but it's missing things. You think there
Yeah.
are things going on at the time you're doing this that fit very well with the themes you're trying to
What?
push, and
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
not getting them.
yeah. It's somebody like you said earlier. It's somebody who's just not part of that scene, writing it really,
Mm.
and that's where it starts to unravel because of it.
But I
Yeah.
think there is still a lot of interesting things to it. I think every time I go back to these sort of play for today and Wednesday play and screenplay and stuff like that, I'm always just amazed at how they could manage, that they could marshal resources to tell something so small. And it must have been great for actors where it's like, nowadays a good acting job is getting to deliver some of the exposition in a superhero film. But then you would open up the Radio Times and it's like, tonight's play, a middle-aged housewife has regrets while buttering her toast, and you think, well, that's just sort of it's just you on screen for ages,
Yeah.
and it's proper acting. It's like just one step removed from going to see them on stage when no one is even editing.
Yeah.
It's really indulgent towards actors in a way that I really like.
Yeah, it's definitely an actor's medium at this time, really,
Mm,
an actor and a writer's medium, as opposed to
yeah.
I don't know what you could describe it now. I don't even know if I could safely describe it as a director's medium. It's just
Oh, I don't think television's a director's medium at all. I think there was a time when it was still a writer's medium, but now it's not even that. Now it's a showrunner's medium, which is
yeah,
horrible,
yeah,
deathly,
yeah.
in my opinion.
I mean, it's funny you should say that. I mean, again, we're recording it this week. The new drama series Marriage with Sean Bean and Nicola Walker has just started to
Oh, yeah.
appalling reviews. Totally
Yeah.
unnecessarily appalling reviews because I absolutely adored it. But then again, I'm a huge Mike Leigh fan. And the writer, Stefan something or other, I can't think of it. It's a long Polish name. Golowitsky, something
Yes.
like that.
Something
He's
like
wrote
that, isn't it?
Mum and Him and Her, and they're all very mightily influenced. But this is proper sort of like play for today type drama in the
Yeah.
sense that it's half finished sentences and just sort of like
Yeah.
shrugs, and there's no drama in it. It's the bits in between the drama. And that's what I love. I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
It is buttering your toast and thinking about where you've gone wrong in life. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I could happily watch that all the time. But people
Yeah.
nowadays are used to Line of Duty, Peaky Blinders. Nothing wrong with those shows, but sometimes you just want a bit of light and shade. You don't. It doesn't
Yeah.
need to be explosion, 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 urgency, exposition all the time.
Yeah, I think most modern shows, it's like TV used to have a 5 act structure, and now it's a 5 twist structure, isn't it? If there
Yeah,
haven't been 5 big twists by the end of an episode, everyone comes away feeling cheated.
but it's getting so cliched though now. I
Yeah.
think it's so run to the ground that
Mm.
you see anything with a star in it now on television. You think, well, he's going to be dead by the end of episode 4 at the very latest,
Yes.
and true enough, it happens. You're like, right, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
It's so predictable, and somebody's got to hit a reset button sooner or later. And unfortunately, I don't think
Mm.
the reception that Marriage has got so far, I don't think that's the reset button. But it should be. It absolutely
Yeah.
should be, and we should be making things like Second City Firsts again. It's
Yeah, because
shocking.
the only people who were permitted to do this now are Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton, and they're doing a fantastic job on it, but they can't do it alone.
No, that's it. I mean, they are doing. Don't get me wrong; they are doing a fantastic job on it. But
Yeah,
even
absolutely.
I'm thinking some recent episodes of Inside Number 9 are just showing signs of fatigue to me. Not all
I
of them,
yeah, I
but
I thought the last season was a really strong one, but I do think after 7 seasons, it should be hitting a point where you can say, all right, we've shown that this can work. We've shown that this can still get an audience. We've shown that people still watch this now. Why not throw the doors open? Why not have something like, as you say, Second City Firsts, where young writers are given a bunch of restrictions, and you say, there you go, if you can work with those restrictions and on a tight budget, we'll make your script. That
yeah,
sounds like the ideal way that television should work to me, and yet it doesn't.
absolutely. But I think the thing is as well, it's that idea of going to the unknown. Young writers,
Mm,
untested writers,
yeah,
they won't dare do it anymore. Whereas
yeah.
Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton, their names, they know what they're getting. They know they're getting a certain script from them. They know they're getting them on screen. So it's
Yeah.
it's familiarity, and they don't realise that breeds contempt in the long run.
And I think one of the other reasons why this doesn't exist anymore is because television is such an international business now. that it makes things like Play for Today and Second City First essentially worthless, because the concept of the show is that there isn't a concept.
Yeah.
Even with Inside Number 9, you had that really weird story where, was it Amazon bought the rights to make an American version of it, and you think, what have you
Oh, wow.
bought?
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know Amazon had that's weird. That's
Because what is
strange.
it? The only concept in Inside Number 9 is deliberately throwaway. The fact that every episode is set inside something that's got a 9 on it is totally irrelevant to what the show is actually about.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, you have to assume the richest man in the world has just paid top dollar for exactly that.
Suppose so, yeah. But I guess even that as a concept as such, because they'll say, "Oh, do you remember the Twilight Zone?"
Yeah.
So, but I mean, the genius of that show is that it doesn't always give you that. It will
No.
play around with its format. I mean, one of the ones I really enjoyed recently, and you gotta nod your head as soon as I say it, because you just gotta know. I knew you'd say that, but it's Love's Great Adventure from about two series back,
I'm
which
going to
was the one
shock
with.
you. I'm going to say I love that episode too.
Hey, that to me is like watching. That's like a Ken Loach Inside Number 9.
Yeah.
So I mean, there was no twist. There was no. Well, there was a twist, yeah, but there was no sinister going. I remember listening to the podcast after it, because they do an Inside Number 9 podcast, don't they?
Yeah.
And they were saying about how they reckon it's going to sort of mess with people's minds. That it is just a straightforward story about a loving family trying to get a damaged, addicted son back into the fold. And
Yeah.
the Reece Shearsmith says his character's sort of like giving the daughter driving lessons. He said, "I know that I'm going to come in and be like, oh, she's done very well, and people are going, oh, he's going to be a creepy, seedy paedophile uncle, isn't it?"
Yes.
because it's Reece Shearsmith and it's Inside Number 9, and just you expect it, don't you?
But that tone, that thing, which is one of the, even as you say, when it doesn't occur, that's one of the strongest elements of the show, that dark comic aspect. That's one of the things everyone associates it with. And that isn't part of the format. That's just what Shearsmith and Pemberton like to write.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's such a sort of light formatted thing that I don't know how you could make a TV producer see dollar signs when it's not
No.
people who, as you say, have this incredible track record.
It's if me and you, say, two people with no background, went to the BBC and pitched that very same idea, you'd never get it off the ground at all. It's because they did League of Gentlemen before it. So they say, well, what have these two guys got? They're a proven track record. That's all it boils down to. Whereas 60s and 70s television and 80s television was about just giving an opportunity to somebody. Some of these people never wrote again.
It's fine. They have their like one shining moment, and you can dig that out, and it still works. Yeah.
They may never even have wanted to write again. It might have just been a question of, well, I fancy a bit of writing. They do the odd bit of bob. They might have a radio script or something like that, and then it becomes a TV script on Second City Firsts or Play for Today or something, and that's it. They go off and get an ordinary job at the end of it instead.
Yeah. But nowadays it's all about serialization, which is why I'm going to do something we've never done before.
Ooh.
I'm going to end this episode of Pop Screen and move it over to our Patreon, where you can hear the second half of our Second City First retrospective about the 1974 play Squire by Tom Pickard.
Starring Alan Hull from Lindisfarne.
Alan Hull, yes. Yeah. So that's on our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Geek Show tomorrow. But until then, that's been your lot from Pop Screen. I've been Graham.
Blobby, blobby, blobby.
Yeah, if that doesn't get you donating listeners, I don't really know what will.
I've been Mark. There we go. I'll play your game, you capitalist bastard.
And we'll see you next week.